Thank you. Grazie e buongiorno a tutti. Hello, everyone. So let me say, first of all, that I'm very pleased to be here today, as when Stefano and Pat, more than a year ago, asked me to contribute to this event. Of course, I was already, I was excited by the conference itself, and I was already looking myself going in the channels through with a gondola, or going to the casino or San Marco Square. And of course, this was not possible because of the pandemic that hit us in the meantime. But then, so we are actually realizing what Stefano anticipated, a kind of art of compromise. And hopefully in 2022 we will meet in person, as also Professor Prodi hoped. And clearly, this is maybe by then we will have also more knowledge about this journey in search of the governance with, of, and by AI. That is a bit of my professional and academic percourse so far. In this sense, in fact, I have also to admit that it is a pleasure to me, because basically I'm somehow in a transition phase, and so maybe if you bear with me at the end of the presentation, I will also give you, tell you a secret about what I will do when I will grow up, if I will grow up. So here is a bit of the kind of outline of this presentation, and also the paper that I contributed in written and will be published in the proceedings. And clearly we have a number of issues that were already mentioned today and yesterday, and in particular, we all know that, and somehow, despite the crisis, of course, of the COVID arrived at the beginning of this year, we were already in a crisis situation for our democratic system. This was clearly mentioned yesterday by Professor Manuel Castells, that I remember when, in fact, with Erika, we met at the meeting of Reimagine Europa back in 2018 in Berlin. I had the pleasure to have his dedication on his book, Ruptured, where in fact this solutionist approach to technology, it is seen sometimes as a way to avoid politics, as Evgeny Mozorov mentioned in and was mentioned in The Guardian in April this year. But on the other side, if we see, for instance, at the work of Mathieu Sergeot and other colleagues, we see that there's a lot of potential for a positive contribution, that opening up data and using technology for crowdsourcing and data analysis can have on making more informed decision and support governance and policy making, also especially at the city level, like for instance we see the work of Carlo Ratti and others on the sensible city, for instance. And clearly, when we talk about democratic innovation, immediately we think about the e-participation, e-democracy kind of rhetoric, I would say, that we've seen in the past, and clearly we see that the moment in the words of Degerman in his article "In Defense of Fear," and this word fear will be very much a leitmotif of this discussion. It is what exactly we are, the status we are living today of anxiety, panic, and dread, where faith and confidence clash and collide in a dynamic and uncertain social milieu. And so democracy, as we were used to know, it's really at risk, more so in this potential long-lasting and enduring pandemic world. Because in fact, this was not new, that we were already living in a very highly digitalized world, and but we all know, and the pandemic actually showed this with all its urgency, the fact that our organizations, both public but also private, are not ready to really adopt these technology solutions and make sure that when there is a problem, they can rebound and somehow be resilient for this. So the key question is how to ensure that actually this digital resilience and the collective well-being can be improved, while at the same time safeguarding our liberal democracy and our individual rights. And in this sense, the current policy debate, and yesterday was also clearly mentioned by Vice President Jourova, show us that there is, let's say, a trade-off between the European approach to digital sovereignty and the global AI governance, where somehow we have to, policymakers are actually in a quite challenging situation, because they are confronted with a dilemma, if not a trilemma, between governing AI and at the same time governing with AI and by AI. And here again, in the words of our much influential colleague Luciano Floridi, in one of his latest paper, The Fight for Digital Sovereignty, it looks like the investiture controversy that somehow was affecting everyone, whether religious or not, and this is the same for the fight for digital sovereignty that will actually determine the lives of all people on both sides of the digital divide, let's say. And so this is clearly important today, because while we are, let's say, the crisis and the pandemic crisis is being prolonged, we see that we are somehow, and our policymakers are somehow following what Cass Sunstein called already in 2005 the law of the fear, the sense that when we have negative side effects that offset the risks avoided, the precautionary principle becomes predominant, and so basically we do not intervene. So in this sense, it is also the effort that I made with the colleagues in my, let's say, obsession about looking at the future. So in the scenario for digital transformational governance at the Horizon 2040, that with colleagues as part of the research I was leading at the Joint Research Center, we've been looking exactly at how the future society could be shaped depending on the decision that will be taken today by our policymakers. And so the assumption we made is based on the fact that clearly on one side we have a digital geopolitical discussion at the moment and debate at the global level that will have effect on the way the digital transformation landscape will be actually developed. And it could be more in a form of interventionist or regulated framework, or rather more laissez-faire approach. On the other side, it's very much important from a foresight perspective to see how the users, the citizens, will actually react to this, if there will be remain somehow in a kind of apathic situation, or being passive to data subjects, or rather will be really fully in power of their digital data and capable to contribute to this process. And clearly here it comes, borrowing an expression from my friend Aaron Rosa, the fact that clearly a scenario is just a possible world, a world that does not have to be, but may yet come to pass. So clearly in none of the scenario we have developed, designed will be the future, although we clearly hope that if we go back here, the kind of open and trusted innovation system would be the ideal world where I would like my daughter and the future generation will grow up. And this is also because to do this, the maker and the shapers of the innovation ecosystem need to come together and somehow trying to go beyond the current fragmented digital infrastructure. So this also brings us to the fact that to really innovate in this digital governance realm, we need to somehow redesign our institutional systems, and somehow we have to make sure that we have, we harness the technology diplomacy capacity that our mainly supranational institutions are actually already deploying. Because on one side we see that there is a strong capacity for the people using technology to organize and deliberate online, and this can, in theory, create new forms of democratic participation and policy making that are completely different from the traditional models of representative democracy or contest-based politics. But this cannot be, let's say, understood or assessed at the local level, but must be institutionalized and become part of a broader debate. Because also, in fact, the social networks, it was mentioned before, somehow looks at the capacity to unite, but also to divide citizens in gathering information, in nudge decisions, and sometimes often through this information. So somehow we amplify the cross-boundary dimensions of the political engagement, and that's why it becomes fundamental to understand how we can govern the data and the digital infrastructure in a way that this engagement can be actually channeled in a positive and constructive way and generate collective wisdom, and somehow really make this technology diplomacy world really work for harnessing our societal well-being. And in this respect is also, I was very pleased yesterday, Professor Sachs mentioned the dichotomy between, the philosophical principles of Aristotle politics and the Machiavellian vision. Of course, this depends also on the way that Machiavelli has been pictured in the history, but it's also true that it could also be interpreted as Christopher Holman did in his essay on Machiavelli and the politics of democratic innovation, that he was imagining in his main work, The Prince, a system of institutions capable, through harnessing this creative energy of the people that are part of the society, to provide the means for the actualization of the human desire. And this is what he imagined as the capacity then of everyone to become somehow a prince. So now in a society that is extremely permanently, pervasively digitalized, we can see that digital technology can empower citizens and can create new ways of engaging in politics and in decision making. But of course, this could have positive or negative side effects in the way then our governance systems, our institutions, our society function and works, as to become a kind of pandemic democracy, as also was mentioned by Lucas and others early at the beginning of this pandemic crisis. And it's true that as this new pandemic world actually evolve and technology can become the main instrument to mediate and even automate some of our actions and deliberations, then policymakers, and in particular, I would say the European Union as the guardian of the treaty and the treaties, and also because of the heritage and the values that are underpinning our society, must be able to keep the pace with these technological evolution. And so in this issue, it is important then that collectively both the policymakers and the researchers somehow merge and forge their capacities. And so this is a bit of an ambitious and challenging, but at the same time also innovative program for policy and research, or an agenda for policy and research that should come up together from different stakeholders in society, so to make sure that to address this multi-pronged topic of governance with, of, and by AI, we on one side experiment with approaches that allows us to engage with policymakers and citizens, for instance, in foresight and system thinking methods, but also on the other side exploiting data-driven policy modeling, so data science approaches that can allow us to support a better understanding and also a better implementation, I would say, in terms of quality and speed also of the decision-making systems that are also reflecting the values of our society. In this sense, the role of the public sector is fundamental because it is at the same time the regulator, but also the potential catalyst catalyst for you as a platform, in becoming a platform for making sure that innovation from different stakeholders can be harnessed. And so that's why with my colleagues in the work I mentioned before on exploring digital government transformation, we emphasize the concept of reframing, where it's not just reorganizing or redesigning processes and functions, but also somehow rethinking the cognitive function, cognitive processes, the values, the cultures, and the shared understanding that are actually part of the values of the public sector ethos. It's in this sense that we could actually contribute somehow to our different way to approach policymaking that is centered on exactly democratic innovation and digital resilience. The two constructs that I introduced at the beginning can offer positive solutions, positive advantages, and at the same time ensuring liberal EU values are respected and actually further promoted globally. Because it's in this sense that the current, the work of the current European Commission and that is pushing into this, let's say, global alliance, I would say, for using technology for the good, I would say. And so, in conclusion, let me say that I was also pleased and that very timely, just before the start of this conference, the Berlin Declaration was adopted, and so we see in these 7 basic principles adopted by the Commission in the Declaration for Digital Government, Digital Society and Value-Based Digital Government, the respect for the fundamental rights and democratic values, the social participation and digital inclusion to really shape a digital world that is human-centric and is required empowerment and digital literacy, trust and security, interoperability, and the digital sovereignty. So to conclude, and also to let's say, for who stayed until the end to know what I'm going to do next, basically the human centricity of technology and AI to make sure that we build a resilient, sustainable digital society is exactly what I will have the pleasure to do next year as part of the International Alliance for a Human-Centric Approach to AI. That hopefully in 2 years, when we will meet again in Venice in person, we'll have advanced in the thinking and the discussions that are started so prominently and timely during this international forum. And so to conclude, I want just to recall, as this week we had also the sad news about the passing away of President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, that was used to say in his famous quote that you can't build a society purely on interest, but you need a sense of belonging. And so with this word, I want to thank again for the opportunity, and I'm sure that we need to really think and be reflexive in our approach, making sure that to shape the future social contract that was also anticipated in some of the papers and discussion, we build on our roots, on our origins, and of course we look at the future as a positive future, but remembering our past. So merci, thank you, grazie, e arrivederci al 2022 a Venezia, hopefully in person. Bye.